Good afternoon, guys. This is Davey T from Field Sports Scotland, and I am coming to you with another episode of FSS Chatback from here in the shed or the summer house or whatever we are. Today, we are going to talk about what's been happening on the moors, especially the moors in Scotland, but I think it's been happening in the moors everywhere in the UK. First of all, what have I been up to this week? Well, this week, I've been doing a little bit of foxing on the farms. I have carried on with the deer management, had a couple of meetings. It's been a kind of interesting week. I've actually had some, at the end of this show, we'll talk about some exciting news coming up as well. Been speaking to the local gun shop. And I went to Moy Game Fair the other weekend there, and I want to talk a little bit about that because I never really got a chance to. I wanted to speak to other people about Moy Game Fair before I put out my own personal opinion on what actually was going on. So let's talk about Moy Game Fair first. I was a little disappointed. Moy Game Fair traditionally was for keepers, stalkers, and shooters and people in the countryside industry to gather, meet up. We got a few gun shops and whatever would come out and they would show off their wares, and we get a chance to socialise and meet people that they genuinely don't get a chance to meet on a daily basis. Remember the gamekeeping community is a very isolated community. We're a very isolated job. Most of us work by ourselves, and once or twice a year we get a chance to go to these game fairs and meet up with people and basically network. I had a feeling it was less like a game fair than a kind of country fair sort of thing. A more anglified country fair that you see down south, and the money didn't really seem worth it to get in this year. There wasn't a heck of a lot of excitement. Traditionally, Moy Game Fair was just before Grouse, before the Grouse started. So all the keepers from Moy and various others estates in the area would all get together and have a bit of a drink and have a bit of a chat and have a bit of chinwag and go and see what kind of shops that had stuff like Armaclouds and various others. And it just didn't feel like that. It didn't kind of have that atmosphere. And I thought it was just me. I thought maybe I'm just having an off day and I'm not being sociable, which happens because sometimes I'm not a very sociable person. But it wasn't me. I spoke to one of the local gun shops who was there, and they basically said that they had the kind of feeling the same. There was very few actual shooters that attended the game fair, which is okay. It is a family event as well. But it just felt different, and it's been slowly moving away from being a game fair over the last few years, especially since COVID. It's been more and more attracting, like, I don't know, families out with the gamekeeping community. And it's weird. I thought it was just me not noticing. You didn't see that many people in tweeds, that many keepers about or who are openly gamekeepers. And when I spoke to the gun shop, they said the exact same. It was like, oh, wait a minute. We just didn't see that many people in tweeds. It was a kind of strange atmosphere. Like, for instance, I was in midday-ish. We arrived at dead on opening, and then we left about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And genuinely, I never seen many heads being marked for trophy heads being for their scorings. I never seen many of them go in. I didn't see much kind of buzz around the BDS tent, which there usually is, as I always pop in and see the guys at Armaclouds, see what they've got on the table, and they had heaps and heaps and heaps of thermals and binoculars like what they normally do, and night vision units, and it didn't really seem that there was that much of a buzz around that tent. Likewise, the Basque tent was the exact same, and it just didn't seem to be, I don't know, it just didn't seem to be right. So you can see there is a big change in the gamekeeping community. There did seem to be a problem there. Not a problem, but just a kind of an obvious change and an obvious look. Sorry, I got distracted because the screen went off on the laptop. Anyway, so yeah, I don't know whether that's down to the actual gamekeepers now are getting less and less and less. Another fact is, I have spoken to a lot of people in regards to deer management groups. It seems like deer management groups are disbanding as well, which is kind of strange. So it's a little bit of news, moving away from Moy. Um, the it's I think it's a lot to do with the deer management nature restoration orders because the government are pretty much taking over the actual management of the deer, what they're expecting from each estate and stuff like that. There's new tools online for to calculate deer density numbers, what you should be culling, what if you expect to have this amount. Um, have, in regards to your acreage and stuff like that. I'm actually looked through the tool. It's quite very easy to use. All you need to do is put down what your expected cull would be, what your expected density would you like. So, for instance, if you work on an estate that says that is 1,200 acres, that's around about 500 hectares. The you want a deer density of 4, you're probably looking to have around about 20 deer on your estate, and that's pretty much what the calculator does. It tells you how many you have to cull so you can get to the optimum figure. So if your count is say 90 and you've got a deer density, you want a deer density of 4, and you that'll tell you how many deer you should have on the estate to get that density figure, and which obviously, if you've got 90, you want to cull various others, but also does calculations in regards to how many stags, how many hounds, what your expected birth rates are going to be, and stuff like that. It's quite an informative tool. It's really good for deer management. It's something that we've used in many years, but we never really used it in that kind of capacity. But it is a similar model to what we've always used. But it's better to see it on a spreadsheet and already there, ready to be used as a calculator. However, yeah, so the deer management group, some of them are just saying, well, what's the point of having a deer management group if this is all going to be taken out of our hands anyway? I'm not going to give my personal feelings about some deer management groups anyhow. So I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. In some areas, it will be a good thing. In other areas, it will be a bad thing. And that is a big deal on that side of things. Anyway, the main topic of today's discussion, as you know, I kind of blabber on a little bit, but the main topic of today's discussion is we're going to look at what's happening on our moors. Now, I looked at the glorious 12th has passed. We are now on the 14th. And I have spoke to a few people and I've seen on in the press, and a lot of you guys have probably noticed that a lot of grouse moors have decided not to shoot this year. And if they did have decided to shoot, they've limited their days. There's a couple of problems to this, and the first problem is obviously the new licensing. The When you apply for the licenses, you have to actually submit maps of the areas that you want to commercially shoot, and that kind of is a bit of a problem. In regards to the clerical sides, there seems to be a backlog on that, and a lot of people are waiting for their licenses because there's a confusion over the maps, and there's a confusion over certain things. So I don't know if that's kind of causing a delay on those who do want to shoot. However, the ones that have decided not to shoot at all or limit their days who have got their licenses, it's been down to a very, very wet spring. And this brings me on to the point in regards to what we are doing in regards to our moorland management and the different forms of moorland management. And I think ecologists who are not necessarily involved in grouse moor management, who are trying to do rewilding or trying to do regeneration or carbon capture or biodiversity on their land that they manage, they really kind of need to look at what's happening on these grouse estates. And I'll tell you why. So a grouse estate, as we all know, is managed 24/7 by a dedicated team who really know about ground nesting birds. They spend their life looking after, rearing, not so much rearing, but protecting and hoping to. What's the word I'm looking for? I always struggle with words, you know this. They're looking to enhance, that's the word, enhance their commercial output by using the ground nesting birds, and in many ways it'll be grouse. They'll do it with partridge and they'll do it with pheasants, but they don't tend to nest and they don't tend to do a lot of breeding on the ground. Usually, partridge and pheasants are brought in from hatcheries or whatever, and they're they kind of get used as game birds from there. But and when it comes to ground nesting birds that are natural, we're talking about grouse, and these guys are pretty much protecting their grouse population all year round, 24 hours a day, and they are trying to get the optimum numbers that they can possibly get. Now, they don't just protect them from predators; they also try and protect them from diseases such as Lieping ill, which we get from parasites like ticks, and they manage the moor to the best of their ability that reduces these risks, because there's one risk that they cannot manage, and that's the weather. Now, we've had a couple of good growing seasons over the last couple of years. And when I say good growing seasons, that means that there's wet springs, good for planting trees, crops, plants, or whatever. But it's really bad for wildlife, especially ground nesting birds. In the springtime, a lot of wading birds come in from the coast and they nest and have their chicks on our moorlands. And genuinely, they do that to try and protect those chicks to have a better chance of surviving because of drier weather inland and drier ground conditions and better environments. But with the wetter springs and even early summers, because to be fair, we were really cold in June there. We were dropping below zero. It was very rainy at points. It was very wet at points, and that was not great for chicks and eggs and whatever, and incubation periods and stuff like that for ground nesting birds who genuinely come in during that period to nest and have their chicks. And many of those chicks sadly have died. And I've fielded a few questions from ecologists and conservationists, not in the gamekeeping world, um, asking me, well, why are we not got that many curlews showing, or that many snipe, or that many um, uh, meadow pipits, or oyster catchers, or any of these wading birds that normally come in? There just seems to be low densities. Well, it's all down to the management. If you're and the weather, if you've got very little management, moorland management, you've got lots of rank heather, you've got lots of long grass, you've got lots of all sorts of stuff that you're not cutting, you're not swiping, you're not managing, and then you couple that with bad weather, you are really not giving any of your wading and ground nesting birds a chance to survive. If grouse moors can't do it, if they can't produce enough birds so that they become commercially viable, then you're not going to be able to do it on a nature capitalist scale or a nature recovery scale, because the fact of the matter is it's a different kind of management. You don't do any heather burning or grass burning. You don't, or muir burn. You don't do any cutting of grass. And I've actually seen in places where the grass is up to waist deep, way beyond its feeding potential. It's not even good for deer. Deer don't even like it. Never mind having ground nesting birds. If you've got very long grass that you're not topping regularly, or it's just going to keep on capturing moisture, and in that grass is just going to grow parasites, it's going to grow ticks, it's going to be attract ticks, it's going to have lots of places for midges, and believe it or not, even deer struggle with midges. So you can imagine how grouse feel with midges, or ground nesting birds feel with midges when it is at their eye level constantly. So you can take all the factors together, and if you look at all the factors, then you'll find a real reason why you are not getting the kind of levels of bird life that you expect. Birds also like shorter kind of heather, for instance, on a more solid ground. They don't really like marshy areas. So if you're re-wetting a peatland, for instance, well, a wading bird is not going to come from the coast to protect its young from the wet and the weather to come to a swamp. they'll not. They're just not. They'll not nest in that. They might as well just stay on the coast if that was the case. Uh, it's just it's just kind of natural knowledge that you have to learn. Watch the environment, have a look at what's going on. I spend a lot of years, I spent since I was a kid, watching animal behavior, bird behavior, moorland behavior, weather behavior. People always laugh at me on how I can look at the weather and kind of predict what's coming before it even comes within a couple of hours, and that's because I spend a lot of time outside watching how things change, watching cloud movement, formations, and stuff like that, learning what I'm used to. Yeah, there's a few strange things. You always get caught out with the odd ninja shower or whatever. But the fact of the matter is, you will find that the more you're out there, the more you can understand what is going on. You're not just looking at the ground, you're looking at everything that's going on. And I did a whole podcast on that. So what's happening on the moorlands is very complicated, but it could be it is a lot to do with environmental change and the later summers, wetter springs, very wet springs, which is good for growing. Don't get me wrong, but it's not good for ground nesting birds. Um, and pretty much colder springs as well. We are getting some really cold springs at the moment. I'm not saying this is down to climate change. I the jury's still out on that one. We do go in cycles, and a lot of people who have worked the land for many years and generation after generation will speak to their granddads and their fathers and all that, and they'll say that, well, during the 60s we had this, and during the 20s we've had this, and a lot of farmers will have diaries, past diaries that were from their fathers and grandfathers, where what they expected a yield was for this time of year, and what they expected in regards to animal yield, for instance, calving or lambing or whatever, what the weather was like and how it expected. A lot of these farms, bigger farms and more farms that have been going for generations, will have previous data from the previous years, and they'll get a better understanding of what to expect for the weather and what's changed and what to expect, what's changed, and what the difference is, and if there's any unusual patterns, they will know that. And gamekeepers are the same. It's a lot of estates will hold diaries of what the weather was like in August 2021 compared to August 2024. They will also know what was, if it's a long-standing estates, they will probably have data of how many broods showed on in the 90s or the 80s or the 70s compared to what is happening in 2024. So it's all about those long-term record keeping and stuff like that land managers have been doing, like traditional land managers have been doing for decades and even a century now. So it's just knowing the ground and knowing what to expect and what not to expect. When you watch certain grounds, you know what to expect every year. Like I've got farms that I expect to see. Expect to see woodcock on every year, and if I went and one winter and I was going through doing foxing or whatever, and I didn't bump at least 4 or 5 woodcock, then I'd start asking questions. So, where's the woodcock this year? I haven't seen a reduction in the woodcock numbers on any of the farms that I help manage the pest control on, and I think it's great. I don't shoot them. I don't do anything with them. The farmer doesn't shoot them, doesn't do anything with them. We just watch them. We know that they're there and come in every year, and they're very well protected. So it's just knowing what you've got in your ground and what to expect from your ground. When you look at that sort of thing in the land management, there seems to be this big division, especially for those who work in rewilding over those who work in the game sector. Now, you really should be comparing data. You really should be looking at the ecologists should be looking what's happening on commercial grouse moors to understand what is happening on the grounds that they're managing. So if you, for instance, and I'll go back to what I was saying before, if you have a moorland that is commercial for shooting grouse, and they've got a dedicated team of 4 or 5. Now, the average 1,200 acre estate will have around about 3 keepers on it, different beats. Each keeper will have their own beat that they will monitor, and they will do the management. They'll all work together to come to the goal for the estate as a whole, but usually you'll have 2 or 3 keepers who will look over that ground. Now, they dedicate their time and they're paid 24 hours a day, often without holidays in a year. They don't work to any working time directive. They work out with hours. They don't work 40 hours a week. They work 80 to 90 hours a week, sometimes more depending on the season. They will they're on the ground every single day, managing that ground, managing the land, managing the environment, managing the habitats, so that they can produce larger numbers of grouse and they can protect that grouse from the elements, from the variables that are detrimental to that grouse. Now, if you're seeing problems with these estates as an ecologist on a rewilding estate, or whether you're on just having small plots of land, or even if you're just working for a conservation charity and you're monitoring areas um, uh, for bird life or whatever, um, you should be looking at what's happening on these commercial grounds to say, right, okay, well, why have they not got that many ground nesting birds this year? What has caused that situation when they're managing it full time? And how can you relate that to your predicament where you're not seeing the what you would expect? There's a whole lot of environmental problems that can cause why you are not seeing ground nesting birds on your land. And a lot that you it could be just that the habitat's not right for them. It could be elevation. It could be, but 9 times out of 10, it's the weather and how the land is managed. Now you can fix the land management part. You cannot fix the weather. So people really need to start thinking about looking into, right, we need to start comparing data. We need to start looking at other data. We can't have this division under land management where people think, oh well, they shoot game, they shoot grouse. We they're a commercial grouse moor, or they're a commercial shoot, or they're a commercial estate for deer management or whatever. We need to have the conversation with them in regards to what they're doing right and what we're doing wrong, and what we're doing wrong and what we're doing right and what they're doing wrong. We really need to have those conversations so that we can have a common goal of a better biodiverse environment, countryside that we live in. Because without that, you're not going to be commercially viable. You're not going to be able to produce the figures that you want to produce, whether you're rewilding and whether you're working on a grouse estate, or whether you're doing whatever goal that you're trying to get to. You need to know all the facts. And if you dismiss a fact because they seem to be the opposition of what your beliefs are, that doesn't mean to say that that fact is irrelevant. It just means that you're ignoring that fact. And if your ignorance is detriment to whatever management plan that you are, um, whatever management plan that you want to follow, then that's a you problem and a management problem on your side, because you're ignorant to the fact of what is actually going on elsewhere. Now, I'm not saying this to hurt anybody else's feelings. You know that I'm just trying to get a conversation gathered for people to understand. I feel sorry for the grouse sector right now. I am grouse mooring, moorland management. It's a very intensive, very ecological job. Most grouse moors are very biodiverse. But there's a lot of work. I mean, everything from muir burn to putting out medicated grit for grouse. And don't get me wrong, it's not just red grouse that take the medicated grit. The just drainage, making sure the moor is as healthy as it possibly can be and be a good enough habitat for all ground nesting birds, not just grouse. The grouse is the main product, having other ground nesting birds is a byproduct. And they don't get shot, they don't get managed, and they just get allowed to have their own life the way they want their own life. And it's fascinating to see. So, but there is a problem with these continued seasons of grouse mares not being able to shoot, whether it's down to legislation or whether it's um, down to the weather. It's making it less viable for to have full-time gamekeepers. I've seen teams of 5 getting dropped down to a team of 3. I've seen um, 2 full-time keepers on an estate, one being made part-time, the other one being full-time. I've seen um, some estates have knocked down from 3 gamekeepers to 1 single-handed keeper. It is it's all about the cost and how to run these estates. And there's less and less keepers out there. And I've seen that at Moy, and I'm seeing that throughout all the people that I'm speaking to. But there's more and more people wanting keepering jobs and less keepering jobs going. And that is very, very hard on the industry, especially when you want to think about working in the countryside and repopulating the countryside and actually making it viable for people living in the countryside, and not just retirees who are buying up a couple of houses, or people from London who are buying up houses in the Highlands and selling them as Airbnbs for an idyllic place for to go on holiday. We are talking people need to live here. We need to keep the economy the countryside economy growing, and we need to manage our land properly. If you have 1 or 2 people that are just saying, oh, well, there's 3 fields there that we just don't want to cut, we don't want to top it, we don't want to do anything with it, we just want to let it grow and die, and hopefully we'll get things living in it. Well, you're going to get insects living in it. You're not going to get very much. It's not going to be safe to walk in. You will get covered in ticks. You'll get covered in all sorts. You'll spend a lot of in the Highlands here especially, you'll spend a lot of your time in mists of midges and things like that. Top that grass once or twice a year. You'll provide good feeding for all sorts of different animals, including like ground vermin, like and small ground mammals like voles and hedgehogs and stuff like that. A hedgehog can't live in long grass, for instance. It will be drowned out. It will become overwhelmed. It will struggle. Um, the you'll not get certain voles and certain mice want to make holes in the when it's like knee deep grass all the time. You know, you top the grass. I honestly, I'm going to be honest. If you look at some of the fields after silage, a week or so after silage, you see, and you run a thermal over it, you'll see how many voles, how many field mice, how many other species of animals that are using that ground. You'll see foxes that are feeding on mice and whatever they're finding. You'll see ground nesting birds. You'll see all sorts of things living in that little environment a couple of weeks after the grass has been cut. You know, even as little as a week after the grass has been cut, you'll start seeing a movement, a flurry of wildlife. And then it grows up to a certain length, and you'll only see that wildlife on the outskirts. And you'll see an abundance of wildlife on the outskirts of those grasslands. But when you're walking through and you're actually investigating what's in it, there's not very much other than insects. So it may look nice to have big meadow grasslands and stuff like that, but it's also better for the biodiversity of that ground to cut it, and it's safer as well for you. Anyway, I think I've waffled on enough about basically everybody having to kind of watch what's going on our moors to understand where we want to go in the future, especially if you want a more biodiverse land to work on. I've got some exciting news, though. Really have. I've got a couple of things. I want to do a live question answer set, maybe once a week, maybe an hour. I'll open up the laptop and stream live, and while I'm kind of cleaning brass or doing maintenance stuff, and you can ask me questions about certain things. I'll do that. I'll start that next week, and I'll schedule it so everybody knows when it's happening. It'll probably be a nighttime thing, so everybody's about. Also, I've been speaking to Armour Clouds and Tane. Now, they've got a heap of Bagaras just come in. They've got 17 HMRs, 6.5 Creedmoors. They've got 308s and various others. Now, some of the prices are well below £1,000. Then we're talking like match grade rifles here that are ready to go. So I spoke to Toby and I thought, well, let's go and take one of those 17 HMRs, get it kitted up with a kind of night vision setup, and let's go and pop a few rabbits and do a bit of review on the Bagara 17 HMR. And let's see if we can get another one. So I put that out to him, and he said, well, I think that's a good idea, but I think he needs to speak to the powers that be before we could be allowed to do that. And that'll be a fun night. Well, if that's so, if you're looking for a Bagara, looking for a new rifle, like, catch up with Armour Clouds, because they have got a heap of them in. They've got, I think, the only one they don't have is a 6.5 PRC, apparently. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a 6.5 PRC. But Bagara are a great brand. Many of the rifles are match grade, affordable prices. So pretty much you're ready to go, and you've got an accurate rifle to shoot. I was talking about this. I'm thinking about moving to Bargara for my 6.5 PRC, because I have got an abundance of Tikas, and Tikas are a bit like Volvos. They are, they're, well, in many ways, they're like Volvos, because they're easy to maintain. You don't have to do much to them. They're always reliable, but they're relatively boring now, because I've got three or four of them, and they are kind of boring. They just do what it is in the tin. There's no difference between any of them. Okay, caliber performance, that's slightly different, but in regards to their performance, they're all three of them are sub MOA rifles at 100 meters. I've got no complaints. So I'm really interested in looking at these Bagaras. It might be a bit of an excitement. I'll get more guests on. I want to get maybe one or two Zulus users or night vision users or various other users that are just users, novices even, folk that have never used equipment before. They've just purchased a new scope. They're just learning. I want to get you guys involved in my podcast. So I want to maybe have a Zoom chat with you one night and have a little bit of an interview. I want to do this more of a kind of you channel instead of a me channel. And I've said this time and time again. And after that last interview that I did with Matthew Reinhardt and Pete Dodsworth, I think it'd be good to get somebody else on instead of just me waffling it by myself for half an hour every week. Anyway, lots of exciting things going on. I thank you again for tuning in my podcast. Like and subscribe. Hopefully you get some information out of the ramblings that I give. Happy hunting, stay safe, and I'll catch you again next week.